I can confidently say that Kevin Durant is probably not going to win another championship for the rest of his career. I think he's going to stick with two, and both of those being the Warriors rings, and I think that will just be that. Because I think the teams that Kevin Durant finds himself on are just way too reliant on him, and there's just so many variables that could just go wrong with them, right? Like, I'm looking at this Phoenix Suns team right now, and I'm just thinking, outside of the big three, who's a real offensive threat that they have? There isn't like a consistent scorer that they can go to aside from Bradley Beal or Devin Booker. The playmaking department is still weak on this team. This team doesn't have a real rim protector. Like, they can't compete with a team like Denver. Denver would smoke them in the 7-game series. You know, teams like Dallas would smoke them in a 7-game series. A team like even Memphis would pick them apart in a 7-game series. And the common theme with teams like that is that they have depth. They have guys off the bench that can score. They have enough size, they have rim protection, they have all these things. And this has just been a common theme with Kevin Durant led teams ever since the Brooklyn era, right? Like, in Brooklyn, they went after James Harden when they didn't really have to. Their team was good enough as it was. They had role players that were good fits next to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They had rim protection. Like, they had a good team. They had very, very complementary pieces. And I'm not necessarily saying that James Harden didn't fit what this team is trying to do. It's just like you gutted your roster for that. Like, they got rid of a guy in Jarrett Allen who was one of the better centers in the league at that time. And now you look at Cleveland, who's the best team in the NBA right now. Jarrett Allen has played his part in that. Think about having a Jarrett Allen, in a situation where you're going up against Giannis, for example, making his life harder in the paint. How are the Bucks supposed to game plan against that? A real rim protector. Same thing in the Boston series. Like, Boston, they would get any look they wanted in the paint, no matter what, because the Nets just didn't have the rim protection. Jason Tatum hit a game-winning layup in Game 1. Do you really think that happens if Jarrett Allen is there protecting the paint? And I know a lot of people are going to bring up Nick Claxton, but he didn't really start getting consistent minutes until like 2022. And even then, he didn't grow into the player that he is right now back then. And then you look at this Phoenix situation, right? Phoenix, after they traded for Kevin Durant, they still had some decent role players on this team. But in the summer of 2023, the Suns decided, let's go after Bradley Beal for no reason. And now they're in a situation where they can't trade the guy because he has a no-trade contract, or no-trade clause. What am I talking about? He has a no-trade clause. And then you also couple that with the fact that the Suns knew he had a no-trade clause going into it. It's not like they gave him a new contract while they traded for him. And then you also add on to the fact that Bradley Beal is just redundant to this team. Like, he doesn't add anything that they need, right? Devin Booker is the guy that's going to shoot the mid-range shots, and he's the guy that's going to face up and ISO and things like that. You already have that. Essentially, what you're doing is you're just asking for Bradley Beal and relegating him to just being a spot-up shooter. Like, these moves are just simply just for talent purposes, right? I don't think that the front offices that Kevin Durant has been a part of understand what fit is. I don't think that the Nets organization understood how bad of a fit and how redundant James Harden would have been for that team, especially when you consider the fact that you're going to have to play Kyrie at the 2, which could bring you matchup problems. And then you also consider the amount of draft capital that the Brooklyn Nets gave up as well. That draft capital could have been used to bring in a possible good center, right? You could have used that draft capital to bring in a star center. Like, maybe, I don't know, crazy thought, but like, imagine they brought in Karl Anthony Towns. He would have been a way better fit next to Kyrie and Kevin Durant than James Harden was. The only thing that James Harden brought to the table was the playmaking aspect, and I feel like they could have gotten that out of somebody who was less expensive and that they didn't have to give up like 3 or 4 first-round picks for. But the Phoenix situation is egregious because essentially what they did was they got rid of Chris Paul. They traded him, I think, in the Bradley Beal trade, and they essentially got rid of Chris Paul just to make Devin Booker the point guard. And I don't think Devin Booker is a bad playmaker or passer or anything like that, but he's not a good enough passer to where he can be your number 1 lead guard, main passer, playmaker. I don't think that Devin Booker is that guy. He's a scorer first, which is why they had to bring in Tyus Jones this past offseason. And a lot of people might be thinking under this video, why are you blaming Kevin Durant for this? Well, the reason why I am sort of putting the blame on Kevin Durant a little bit is because he's the one that advocated for all this. He advocated for the Nets to get Steve Nash as the coach instead of keeping Kenny Atkinson around. He's the one who advocated for the James Harden trade. He wanted Bradley Beal in Phoenix. And the only thing this has led to is a possible Kevin Durant trade in the summer. There are reports out there that are saying that the Suns are probably going to trade Kevin Durant because they have no other options left. They traded away DeAndre Ayton in the Damian Lillard trade. They traded away Chris Paul. They traded away pretty much all of their core except for Devin Booker for Kevin Durant, who, while yes, he's still great, he's still an all-star, definitely an all-NBA player at 34, 35 years old. But you have to ask yourself, was the juice worth the squeeze? Was it worth giving up a guy in Mikal Bridges who you could have kept around for a little while? Was it worth giving DeAndre Ayton, who's a young center who has the opportunity to turn it around in Portland and has been playing better this season than he did last year? Was it worth giving him up? Was it worth giving up Cam Johnson, who's been sought after by contender after contender? Was it worth even giving up Chris Paul, who, while yes, Chris Paul is old, Chris Paul is still a valuable, serviceable player in the NBA right now. He could have served as the lead guard that you needed. Even if you wanted to keep Kevin Durant and, have this, Booker Durant duo in Phoenix, you could have at least kept Chris Paul. Chris Paul wasn't really the problem. He was obviously not as great as he was during those finals runs, but let's be honest here. Chris Paul is still a 14-8 on good efficiency type player. And when I'm looking at teams that could possibly trade for Kevin Durant at this point, the only team that makes sense to trade for Kevin Durant at this point is the Dallas Mavericks, because they're the only team that has the draft capital and the assets to make it actually happen. You can trade a guy like PJ, you can trade a guy like Gafford, maybe even throw in Max Christie and one of those draft picks that you got in the Luka Doncic trade, and you might have Kevin Durant on your team. Now, do I think that the Mavericks with Kevin Durant are contenders? Possibly, but I don't think that they're any threat to win the title, because again, it's the problem of the lack of playmaking on this team. It's essentially just Brooklyn Part 2 with Anthony Davis on the roster, right? I don't think Kevin Durant is a bad defender, but there are times where he just is completely lost defensively, or he's just not putting in effort just to conserve energy or something. But Kevin Durant, at the very least, for what he is a serviceable defensive player, which is something that the Dallas Mavericks value for some reason. I don't know, ever since they traded Luka Doncic, they've really been about defense for some reason. The only other team you can really make an argument for is Miami, but I don't think Miami is that dumb. I don't think Miami realizes the potential opportunity that they could be in after the Jimmy Butler trade. So no, I don't think that they're gonna trade a bunch of assets for a 35, 36-year-old Kevin Durant. I don't think it's possible. Some people have thrown around teams like Denver, and well, I think Denver with KD would be dangerous. Again, they just don't have the assets that they used to. I believe Denver has a little bit of draft capital, but would it be worth it? I mean, the Nuggets have been good this season. I don't think they're in need for a star player. The only possible trade piece that you would give up is Michael Porter Jr., and Michael Porter Jr. is still very young. I would rather just keep him around and just keep running it back with this team and just surrounding Jokic and Murray and MPJ with good role players, because the Nuggets, they did it once without a real star next to Jokic, other than Murray, of course, but they didn't have to go after, a guy like Dame, for example, or Jimmy Butler or Kevin Durant in the past, right? They didn't have to go after any of these guys, and they still won a title. Not to mention how deep they would be in the second tax apron. I don't think it's worth it for Denver, man. The only reason why I think Dallas is the real destination for KD is just because they're the only team that's willing to put up with his BS, right? They're the only team that's going to be willing to put up with KD being KD. They're going to want to give him the money that he asked for. They're probably going to. They're going to put up with the media antics and things like that. And they're probably the only team that I've listed that is willing to go deep into the second tax apron just to keep this team and core together. And people are going to hype this team up. People are going to look at this team and be like, bro, this team, they're a lock for the finals and things like that. People are going to overhype this team, and they're going to be disappointed when they inevitably fall to one of these other teams. They're inevitably going to fall to a team like OKC, just because they just don't have enough, right? They just don't have enough talent to keep up with OKC, and they can't match up with them well either. And what this means for Kevin Durant's career if he doesn't win another championship is that people are going to try and discredit him. They're going to say, oh, well, KD really has 0 rings because those 2 rings with Golden State don't count. And I'm going to give my 2 cents on that argument. Here's my thing, right? When it comes to rings, you can't just completely disqualify an NBA championship, because at the end of the day, you could have the 12 best players in the entire league on one team and they could go against the rest of the league. That would still be a legitimate championship to me. Now, would I value that championship on a level of a 2016 Cavs championship or 2011 Dirk or 95 Hakeem? No, I wouldn't, because the difficulty of the road of the playoffs matters to me. Not all championships are created equal, but that doesn't mean that the championship is completely disqualified within itself. I feel like Kevin Durant did earn those championships because he was the best player on that team. He won both the finals MVPs, and say what you want, for better or for worse, he was the difference maker for the Warriors, right? And it's going to be interesting when Kevin Durant retires, because the way that people are going to talk about him, it's going to be so black and white, right? Like, it's going to be so black and white to the point where people aren't even going to try and have nuance in these conversations. And if Kevin Durant proves me wrong and he actually wins another championship, I will be pretty shocked, because so far the trajectory that he's been on the past few years has just been horrible. Like, I'm going to be honest, he's still playing great basketball, but I just mean from the standpoint of just the chance of him winning a title, it's just been awful. But that's it for this video. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button down below. If you agreed or disagreed with anything I said in this video, let your voice be heard down in the comments. I am on the push to 1,000 subscribers, so if you could subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. It helps really push the videos into the algorithm. But that's it for me, and I'm out. Peace.